Hello and welcome to aptdemy. Today's video is going to be on sentence structure. These are all the topics that we are going to cover in today's session. Sentence structure is the grammatical arrangement of words and phrases in a sentence for it to make complete sense. And whenever the structure isn't right, we see a number of things. The first thing that we see in cases of faulty structuring is known as run-on sentences. What is that? A run-on sentence occurs when two or more independent clauses or ICs are connected improperly. So if you go back to the punctuation lesson, I have told you that two ICs cannot be joined with a comma or with a colon. Two ICs can be joined either by a period or a semicolon or a comma plus fanboy. So in case we do not follow these three rules, the resultant is known as what we get, run-on sentences. For example, let's look at this sentence. I love to write papers. I would write one every day if I had the time. If you look carefully, there are two complete ICs in this sentence. Number one being I love to write papers, that is our first IC. And our second IC is I would write one every day if I had the time. This is our second IC and there is no punctuation used. So this is a run-on sentence. In order to make this correct, what we could have done is we could have put either a period or a semicolon, or we could have put a comma plus a fanboy. So anytime two ICs are joined together with improper punctuation, the resultant is known as a run-on sentence. The next thing, comma splice. When does that happen? One common type of a run-on sentence happens when two independent clauses are joined with just a comma. So if you look at this sentence, participants could leave the study at any time, comma, they needed to indicate their preference. Our first IC, and this would be they needed to indicate their preference, it would be our second IC. And two ICs cannot be joined by just a comma. If you have to use a comma, always make sure to follow it up with a fanboy. So over here only the comma is used, so the fanboy is missing. So if you join two ICs with just a comma, the resultant is a comma splice. Now some comma splices also occur when the writer uses a transitional expression. For example, this sentence, the results of the study were inconclusive, comma, therefore more research needs to be done on the topic. This is our first IC. This is our transitional expression or the conjunctive adverb, and this is our second IC. So the writer has used therefore or a conjunctive adverb to break the sentence, but what here he has done is that he has used the wrong type of punctuation. How do we make this sentence correct? By using either a semicolon. In this case we will use a semicolon, or you could we could have, if this was capital, then we would have used a period, but it is not, so we'll use a semicolon before therefore and a comma after therefore to correct the punctuation in a comma splice error. I have written it down over here. The results of the study were inconclusive, semicolon, therefore, comma, more research needs to be done on the topic. Now, how do you correct run-on sentences? There are four basic methods. the easiest way to correct a run-on sentence would be to use a period or a full stop. It works in every case unless the sentence is a continuing sentence and the sentence is not beginning with a capital letter. Also make sure that the resultant should not be choppy sentences. So make sure that you are using period where it is required. So for example, if we take the paper example from before, I love to write papers, full stop. I would write one every day if I had the time. So a period would work over here. Now, next way to correct a run-on sentence would be to use a semicolon. Like here, I would love to write paper, semicolon. I would write one every day if I had the time. You can use comma plus fanboy. I love to write papers, comma, fanboy, and I would write one every day if I had the time. Or the fourth method is using a subordinate conjunction and turning the IC into a DC wherein it would be okay to use a comma, because we can connect a DC with an IC using a comma. So over here, because if we add the subordinating conjunction before I love to write papers, it makes this entire sentence a DC or a dependent clause, and this is still an IC. So it is okay to connect the DC with an IC with just a comma. Then it justifies the use of a comma. So you can use subordinating conjunction to change an IC to a DC, wherein then it would be okay to use a comma. But otherwise, what you need to do is use the correct punctuation for connecting an IC to an IC. So either use a period, use a semicolon, use a comma plus fanboy, or simply change the IC to a DC. Everything will depend on the context of your question and what the question is demanding out of you. Now, sentence fragments. What is a sentence fragment? A sentence fragment is a string of words that misses an important part of the sentence. It might be missing the subject, it might be missing a predicate, the verb or word phrase, or it might be an incomplete idea. So a DC can also be a fragment, a phrase can also be a fragment. So example of a fragment would be shows no improvement in any of the vital signs. Who? It leaves us with the question who shows no improvement in any of the vital signs. So it is lacking the most important element of the sentence, which is a subject. It lacks a subject. So how do we correct it? We need to correct it by introducing the missing subject. So over here, if we say the patient shows no improvement in any of the vital signs, now we understand that it is the patient that was spoken about. Now, what if a fragment is missing a predicate? Let's look at that. Or an action. The doctors who were using peer-reviewed research articles that contributed to the body of knowledge in their fields, which was obstetrics. Now, even though the sentence is a long sentence, it is missing an important part of the sentence. It doesn't tell us what the doctors were doing. It doesn't show any action that the doctors were doing. So even though this might right off the bat look like, okay, this is a long sentence, it must make sense, it actually doesn't when you read it. So again, when you identify that it is missing an action, what do? You introduce that action. So the doctors who were using peer-reviewed research articles that contributed to the body of knowledge in their field improved their knowledge of obstetrics. So now we have introduced the action that the doctors were doing. So that is your sentence fragments. Now last would be your parallelism. Parallelism or parallel construction simply means that whatever sentence or whatever passage is using, it should be in a consistent form. So if you're using a certain form of adjective, it should be consistent throughout. If you're using a certain form of noun, or if you're using a certain form of verb, it should be consistent from start to finish. Now let's look at this sentence. Amy enjoyed running and to ride horses. Now running is an ing form, but to ride horses is not parallel to this. So what do? We change it and make it consistent. So Amy enjoyed running and horseback riding. So we have made both these verbs into the ing form. Our field trip included a visit to the art museum, talking to a local artist, and a workshop on oil painting techniques. So one we have the ing form and others we have in the simple verb form. So what do to make it consistent or parallel? We change all of them into the ing form. So our field trip included visiting the art museum, talking to a local artist, and attending a workshop on oil painting technique. So you need to make sure that the sentence is parallel from start to finish. Whatever form of verb, adverbs, adjectives you have used, you maintain that consistently throughout. And that is it. So the first thing that we learned was a run-on sentence where you join two ICs with a proper punctuation. Second would be your comma splice, where you are joining two ICs with just a comma. Then we went on to sentence fragments, where a sentence fragment is just bits and pieces of a sentence missing important elements, maybe like a subject or a predicate or an action. And lastly, in the structure you will see parallelism, which means that you need to make the entire structure of whatever you're writing, or the entire passage structure should be in consistent form in terms of the words that are being used. And that is it for your sentence structuring. I have given you some references that you can use for further insight, and also do not forget to tune in to our website www.aptdemy.com. We have curated really nice practice materials. You have full-length mock tests and also addendum files after every topic done in class for your further practice. So do not miss that out. And with that, I will meet you in next class. Thank you.